Shabbat Shalom. So it's incredible everything that can happen in 1 week, right? Exactly a week ago, we were here together and we were watching as the bombs were flying, and we had no idea how this is going to resolve itself. I mean, it's an incredible thing that Israel pulled off, and we should all be very proud. But unfortunately for us, Jewish history has this impetus. It doesn't just stop, right? Somehow, we as a people are always in the eye of the hurricane. And I want to share with you something this evening. I want to talk a little bit about what happened in New York City this week. The election of Zohran Mamdani. If you haven't heard about him, he's a 33-year-old young man who's actually very charismatic, and I do not doubt that he could actually be potentially a very good leader. And by the way, before I even say a word about him, I need to tell you, my problem with him is not that he's Muslim. My problem with him is not that he portrays himself as a socialist. That's up to him, okay? My problem with him is what he believes about us, about the Jewish people, and the way he tries to hide it behind a political ideology that really, at this stage in the game, we should all be aware is a covert ideology for blatant anti-Semitism. Look, a week ago, if I would have told you he was going to win the primary election for the Democratic Party in New York City for mayor, you would have told me I was out of my mind, and I would have agreed with you. But something happened, something that really surprised us, but it shouldn't surprise us. If you look at the numbers and you look at he climbed in the polls in the last minute and how he won, there is no way he had that victory without the Jewish vote. Okay? Now, I also need to tell you that if the best that party has to offer is Andrew Cuomo, we also have a problem. So it's really not who Zohran Mamdani is, but it's also about who Cuomo is. And if you've been to New York City in the past months, I mean, the city is not what it used to be, honestly, right? There's trash everywhere, homeless people everywhere. It's like back to the 90s, if you remember what it was like. And so, in a way, I understand that people want a change. And when people want to change, no matter what happens, they're going to vote for the change. We have the examples both on the extreme right and on the extreme left. And for us as Jews, the problem is that we like to be in the center, and we should also always be in the center. Because historically we know that the extreme left or the extreme right is never good at the end of the story for us. It's an important lesson to learn. Now, another thing that we shouldn't be surprised about is that part of the Jewish vote that elected him in the primary, he's not the mayor yet, was the vote of a lot of young Jewish voters who not only feel disenfranchised from the idea of Israel, and this was a punishing vote, believe it or not, but they feel disenfranchised from their own community somehow. So let me tell you a quick story. This is not new to us. 200 years ago, in Poland, a young baby who was born, the name of Leon Pinsker. And Pinsker grew up to be a doctor, a medical doctor, who graduated from the University of Odessa. And he established an incredibly successful practice in Odessa. But he also was a very proud Jew, and he wrote a pamphlet called the Autoemancipation. Now, if you've never studied Zionism, the Autoemancipation, which precedes Herzl, is really an essay about what's in store for the Jewish people if we do not understand that we are not a religion, but a people, that we are a nation. And you have no idea the flack that Pinsker got for writing this. He's one of the early Zionist fathers of the new political Zionism of the 19th century. He was completely secular, by the way, which was another rare thing because most Zionists in those times were religious people. And so he got tremendous backlash from the ultra-Orthodox who said to him, we cannot have a state if the Messiah doesn't come. And Pinsker was the first one that began with the idea, look, I don't care where the state is going to be, but it has to be. Because we cannot just continue to exist the way we do. It's not going to end well. And there were people also who said, you're crazy, they're going to see us as having dual loyalty, there's going to be a lot of anti-Semitism, we cannot go that route. We cannot have our own state. So this discussion is not new. There is one difference, though. Now we know what happens when we don't have our own state. Back in the 19th century, we had no idea. So the fact that after all these years, some of us do not understand history is a very problematic thing. And it's more problematic because these are children of parents who are dismayed that they could think this way. But we shouldn't be dismayed. We, after all, pride ourselves of being part of the fiber of a country where equality and the melting pot is what it's all about. And so the more that we lose our difference with others, the more that we become the same, the more our children cannot understand why the difference is not better or makes us better, but it's an important difference. Because we are a people. We don't come to synagogue like a Christian goes to church. For us, coming to synagogue is a national exercise. It's not only about praying, believe it or not. It's about community building. It's about being with one another. For centuries, the only place where we could gather with one another as Jews was inside the synagogue. So we are a completely different bird and a very unique people. And that's why Mamdani's words are so problematic. Because he tweeted many times in the past, globalize the Intifada. That's what bothers me. I don't care that he wants to open city-run supermarkets or he wants to freeze rents. You know what? I don't live in New York. I don't want to live in New York. I live in Nevada, thank God. But I do care that somebody that could be the mayor of the city with the largest population of Jews in the world, you heard me right, New York City has the largest population of Jews in the world, more than Tel Aviv, more than Jerusalem, could actually say, globalize the Intifada, and nobody beats an eyelash. Because what those words actually mean is kill the Jews. The two young people dead in Washington, D.C. were victims of globalizing the Intifada. The Holocaust survivor burned in Boulder was a victim of globalizing the Intifada. The harassed students in Columbia University, victims of globalizing the Intifada, a call that Mamdani has made time and time and time again. When asked if Israel has a right to exist as a Jewish state, he doesn't answer. He repeats, Israel has a right to exist as a state where there's equality, where there's no apartheid, where there's no differences. Okay. That upsets me, but we've always had that. But anti-Semitism at that level of globalizing the Intifada is something that really should concern us. And that's a covert language that's been used for the past year and 8 months to lash out against our people. On October 8th, he was calling to globalize the Intifada on Twitter. The graves were not even fresh in Gaza, across the border in our kibbutzim. And this mamzer was already calling to globalize the Intifada. Another problem is that Jews in power don't see anything wrong with this. And again, here is my problem, right? And I've said this to you 1,000 times, and I have to say it again because I don't want to be misunderstood. I don't come from the left or from the right. I am a Jew. I'm speaking as a Jew. Jewish leaders cannot let their personal politics become more important than their peoplehood because they stop being leaders. This Torah portion that we read this Shabbat about Korach has one of the most poignant lines in the entire Tanakh when talking about leadership. Rav lachem, ki kol ha'eda kulam kedoshim ubetocham Adonai, o madua titnasu el kahal Adonai. So what does Korach says to Moses? You have gone too far. The whole entire people, we're all holy. And the Lord is in our midst. God is in us. Why do you, Moses, raise yourself up above everybody else? They're falsely accusing Moses of doing something he hasn't done. And you know what Moses does? Instead of siding with Korach, instead of saying, oh, you're right, you know, instead of trying to keep his position, he talks to God and he lets it happen. And God lets it rip. And the earth opens up and swallows Korach and his followers, and they were not a small number. Part of Jewish leadership is standing up to those who question your values and being able to say, hold on for a second. There is a line that I don't cross. How many times, dear friends, did I hear during my lifetime, and as an American, the leader of the Democratic section of the United States Senate say, my last name is Schumer, which means Shomer, and I'm always going to be here guarding the Jewish people. Well, this week, he failed completely. And this is not, again, about politics. It's about being a leader, about being a man, about standing up for what you believe and for your people. It's about knowing that in the middle of the 20th century, the biggest atrocity, the darkest time in our history happened to us. And not being able to say, globalize the Intifada is wrong. That's my problem. And you should have a problem too. Because what's happening in New York is just a prelude of what's to come if we don't stand up to it. And we have to call it what it is. Blatant, pure anti-Semitism of the worst kind. The videos are on YouTube of him calling for the global Intifada. The tweets are there. He didn't erase them. He's proud of it. So there's no way anybody within the Jewish community that understands our past can defend this guy. You know, Pinsker also wrote in the Autoemancipation pamphlet that Judeophobia is a mental sickness. He didn't call it anti-Semitism. He called it Judeophobia. And he said it's a mental sickness and you cannot cure it. Remember, he was a physician. You cannot cure it. They will be here as long as we're here, so we might as well close ranks and watch out for one another before it's too late. I want us to remember this man from Odessa, Leon Pinsker. When I was a young 15-year-old in the youth movement, I read the Autoemancipation. And when I brought it home, my father said to me, oh, wow, you really are reading Zionist propaganda. You know, I really didn't understand what he was trying to tell me. But for his generation that was born before the establishment of the State of Israel, that debate was very much alive. And the 1940s completely settled the debate. So when I read the Autoemancipation, I really became convinced of what Pinsker said. The creation of a Jewish nationality is the only way that we will be here centuries from now. A friend of mine, who's sitting here, but I don't want to mention him by name because I don't want to embarrass him, said to me the other day when I shared with him something that somebody sent me, I can't understand how we've been around for so long with people that think like this. And the answer is, we are a unique people. And recognizing that is also part of what keeps us here. But don't forget, that uniqueness is what should always keep us together too. Shabbat Shalom u'mevorach.